Good evening, everyone. Thank you and welcome to the special council meeting for Thursday, January the 16th. It's 6 p.m. Everybody, please be advised this meeting could be recorded, not could be, it is being recorded for public broadcast and accessed by the public. So with that, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Moved by Councilor Tory, seconded by Councilor Venus. Questions to the motion?
Is it Tory or Plum?
It was Tory first and then Venus. To the clerk. With that, we'll move on to item number 4, bylaws, item 4.1, first and second reading, 3041 Main Street rezoning.
So as council knows, on December 9th, we held a public hearing for rezoning at 3041 Main Street to permit a vehicle repair garage, which is currently under operation under a conditional temporary use authorized by the PRAC. We had this on the agenda for Monday's meeting that was canceled, and just based on timing, are holding a special meeting for council to consider first and second reading. In addition to the proposed bylaws that have been on the town's website that are in the package, we've also included an email from Sam, the planner from Plan 360, who's been working on this file that outlines the process for basically rectifying any complaints that arise from a Plan 360 that are submitted to Plan 360. Just from a process perspective, that was mentioned at the public hearing in December when questions were raised around parking. So with that, there's an updated resolutions form on that's printed for you. That is a shorter version because they can be read by title only. And then we can answer any questions if the council has any.
I move the council, so we need to do the motion right now? So that we can ask the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I move the council of the town of Salisbury give first and second readings by the bylaw 50-2-A bylaw to amend bylaw number 50, Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan, PID 702-86810 by title only.
Moved by Councilor Bannister, seconded by Councilor Thorne. Questions to the motion?
Okay, there's lots of
Yep,
questions.
so many. You proceed.
Well, I'm gonna ask the same question that I asked when we had the public hearing, and that is about the parking. Because we had a temporary permit out there that denoted 6 vehicles could be parked in that front parking space. And it doesn't matter what day of the week you go by, there's 15 vehicles there. And I understand that the landowner said that the majority of them are personal vehicles. So how do we protect and proceed with regulating how many vehicles the business can have when he's tying all of his personal in with the business and also spreading out onto the adjacent property, which is not his?
See, and that's the key, as that was sort of the light that went on for me as to why he seemed to be very confident about adhering to the requirements, is when he said that he's got permission from his next door neighbor to put cars on there. And I must admit, afterwards, and even since then, I keep thinking, I know it has nothing to do with this, but it does. And is that something that we need to look into? You know, because like we shouldn't be having situations, and I know that there are probably exceptions to that rule, where people are looking for a workaround to bylaw requirements, right? And it feels like he's found a workaround, and hence we have all these cars that are unsightly, quite honestly, and it may not fall into the category of unsightly premises, but when you consider what we're trying to do with the town, And that, you know, we keep talking about other towns where you have, you know, not just residents, but potentially people coming into the town to shop or to go from here and there, and how important it is for that main street to have a certain look. And I know that, you know, while there's probably, you know, things that we'd like to do over the course of the next number of years with that main street, I'm not so sure driving into town with a, you know, all that, looking at that is what we want.
But
Okay,
just,
so let's go back. So you had a question, if you have that, need to have answered. Is that something that we can answer tonight? Your question was what?
How do we deal with it, I think?
was regulating
Yeah.
that was the question, was regulating the maximum amount of vehicles when the landowner clearly indicated that only 3 or 4 were for the business and the majority of them were personal. And there's, like I said, there's always an excess of double digits on that property. And I don't understand, like, I guess, is there a transportation business there too? Because why are there always tractor trailers parked
Yeah.
when they're not part of the,
I
like,
think most of the business is tractor trailer like repairs, and then like motor vehicle inspections is what needs to have the zoning confirmation, I think.
because the
based
tractor trailers are always parked on the adjacent land, so the other landowners'
on- Okay,
property, for the most part. My other thing is as a town, so because we're accessing trails, we're building trail systems and stuff, and as we continue to grow, and we put a curb and sidewalk out there, how does that, because when you look at the plan, if you bring up the plan, you clearly see that those, just saying 6 vehicles in that will end up being on the sidewalk.
Good point.
Because, I mean, clearly, you know, we will be, that area is zoned industrial, so as we continue to grow, I would think that that would be part of the plan.
yeah, part of that, you were right, when you look at the GOMB lines, it
Yeah.
does, I think it does go in, it's an easement, a utility easement, I think is
Yes.
what that is on the, yeah.
Right,
Yeah, I think and to answer your question on regulate, I think that's the intent of the email from Sam is there's a kind of a, I don't want to say scripted, but a process to
I read
follow.
the process of what it would be, but I guess this is the thing, like,
It's a challenge with
Yes.
vehicles because they can
Right.
be moved, and there's a requirement to, let's say if a complaint was submitted saying that they were not abiding by the site plan, and it were to be investigated, by the time the investigation happens, more than likely the vehicles have been moved, which
Yeah.
means that the file is closed, basically, from that process perspective. So it's definitely challenging.
and then
from a
whose job
regulating-
does that become to continue to enforce that? Is that,
Plan
you
360.
just call,
Yeah,
okay, so
Plan
it's,
360.
yeah, so absolutely, it's not like our own bylaw officer is able to just jump in the car and go down there. So by the time it would thread through, it's already been rectified.
Yeah.
Well, or not.
And we've spent, maybe we haven't spent, but Plan 360 would have spent resources to investigate that.
Correct.
I guess I'm not comfortable moving forward with it the way it looks today. There's, the side of the building is lined with used tires. It just looks like a mess. If, the only way that I would be okay with approving this is if there was some sort of a plan to improve the way it looks and to keep refuse from being visible from Main Street.
And I agree with that 100% because we have an issue and it's no secret in Riverglade. We're becoming the junkyard capital. And it's so important that people take pride in their properties and not use it as a dumping station. You know, there's Eco 360. You have tires that have to go in the garbage, bring them to the, you know, this is the thing. But
Or put up a fence.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a way that it could, maybe that's what we say. Maybe we say, okay, we need parameters here. There needs to be fencing. Everything needs to be contained within the fence. Like, I guess these are the questions that we need to,
Yeah, and I have a few concerns as well. One, I don't think that we want to increase more industrial zoning in our downtown core.
Mhm.
We want to get away from that, but you know, the limited, yes, agreed. But I felt it. I see.
You felt it.
The encroachment on a neighbor's property is temporary, right? Like, that's current. What happens when that landowner says, I want your stuff moved off my property? Where does it go?
Yeah.
Right? And that, like, it's gonna have to go somewhere, and it will. My second concern is we have a process for requesting rezoning before you start your business. And I feel like this has put us in a really awkward position, because if we deny
Yes.
this zoning, this business has to cease.
Mhm.
I don't like setting the precedence that homeowners and property owners can do what they want and then tie our
Ask
hands
for
here,
forgiveness after.
and expect us to always
Mhm.
set aside all of our concerns because we don't want to see a business shut
Mhm.
down.
But the other point, to add to your first point, the landowner can tell him, I don't want to see these vehicles here anymore. But he could also say, oh, by the way, you can put more vehicles on here. if you
Yeah.
like."
Exactly.
Right, and we would have nothing to say about it, at least at this, if we approved it, because he'd already said, oh, well, I'm just getting permission from my
Mhm.
neighbor to put cars here. But what if they decide to put more cars there than the ones that are already there?
So what is I guess, what is the ruling on that? Like, if,
On the neighboring piece,
Yeah.
that would be a civil piece between neighbors,
Mhm.
until it gets to a point where we can.
no, I understand that, but okay, let's use the Riverglade let's use Riverglade right now as an example,
Mhm.
okay? So Art Hill decides to, and I mean, everybody knows it's Art
You're
Hill
gonna pick,
property.
you're gonna pick on them.
I'm gonna pick on him. Love you, Art Hill. So he comes in and with his tractor trailers, and he dumps 40 vehicles in that property that's adjacent, because kind neighbor says, you can use this field to dump those in. What is the ruling? So can he just fill that field with a bunch of non-operating vehicles?
Yes. It's zoned industrial, so I don't know if it would have to meet the definition of something that would be permitted there, but a mechanic garage is. So if they said that they were operating a mechanic garage there, then hypothetically, yes. There were vehicles on that site, the neighboring site, actually. It's just there were trees and. they're
Yeah,
trying to
because he's
tidy
been
up
cleaning it
stuff.
up
Yeah.
as
Now-
of recent.
Now, I'm sure there is no bylaw around the number of vehicles that you can have on premises.
Not an industrial zoning.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I guess the question is, and maybe that might be an issue for a later date. If we're having these kinds of problems, maybe we should have one.
Well, the question is, when does it become a junkyard?
Well,
When do junkyard rules apply?
And it's not even that, if they took pride in it and, don't use it as a dumping ground. If you wanna keep it neat, keep it tidy, keep it cleaned up. That's all, like, that to me is a show of passion of what they're doing.
Also, we know it's possible because there are other mechanic shops around
Yes.
out
Yeah.
everywhere that are able to keep it clean. So to
Yes.
me, my opinion is there's not enough room for whatever personal stuff he's got going on and a business in that area. It's too
And that
messy.
seems to be the problem.
Yeah.
is There's just not enough space
Yeah.
for the 13 or 14 or 15 vehicles that he wants to
Right.
have there all the
So
time.
if he's got that many personal, I don't think there's enough room for a business there. And as soon as that road opens back up to how it is supposed to be without a one-lane bridge,
Yeah,
then does it become dangerous because there's that much stuff there? People
Yes.
pulling in and out on that road? Like, I
Yes.
think it does.
it does.
It's a blind
It
curve.
does.
Yeah.
It does become a dangerous and safety concern. It really does.
Yeah. So I'm not super interested in this. That's my opinion.
So, so the adjacent property, we can't be ruling on anything on that adjacent property only because it's.
Correct. We're dealing with an
We're just-
application on
completely
this
separate. We
specific
have to
portion
look at
of
this
that specific.
particular portion,
I
whether.
think we're just asking questions as
No, I
to,
understand.
in round table, like, how does this work, right?
It's hard to move forward with it when we're having problems with it today.
This is the other thing. So if the temporary says can only have 6 vehicles, if we're already having an issue, this is also a concern for me. If we're already having an issue, what happens when we do the permanent approval?
So concerns have been raised to Plan 360, which have gone through that process of going to the landowner, and because there have been some communicated to them that questioned whether or not they were abiding by the site plan. And we have it is what it is today. There have been concerns passed along to the landowner. That's what I'll say. So technically, there have been essentially complaints initiated on not abiding by the site plan, and the response has been what we heard at the meeting in terms of a lot of those are personal.
So he's aware that there are concerns about this.
Yes.
And has done nothing to clean it up. Really. As I drove by today and saw that he has done nothing to clean it up. I feel like that's our answer.
Are we indicating that the vehicles sitting on the adjacent property? Are we indicating vehicles on this property?
That would need a survey.
I think that's something that says
No,
these
I-
are the
but
business
that's
of
what I'm
these
getting- I
are.
just want to be careful here, just because we're talking about the one property we're talking about the zoning on. The other property, again, because we've already indicated that can have vehicles on it. It's a separate agreement. We may not like it, but it is a separate agreement that we have to talk about. But the what ifs are later. Obviously, if another landowner indicated that he couldn't do that, he wouldn't be able to do that going forward. I just want to be very careful that everybody understands all of the information that we're talking about this one particular property on the zoning and whatever deals he may have. And if there are additional vehicles on a separate property, that is, we may not like it.
Yeah, I think considering Councillor Thorne's point of the size of the lot, I think there has to be some consideration as to the materials that are being stored on the adjacent lot are because he doesn't have room on that lot to
Mhm.
operate the business that he needs to operate.
Yeah, that's like
And the
an-
residential.
And have his,
And have it- and have
like
it-
all
yeah.
of that stuff could be his personal stuff, doesn't really matter. He
Right.
doesn't have enough spot there to keep his belongings and operate the business.
That's the evidence.
But that's
It's
a
clear.
valid concern in of itself, but Plan 360 apparently doesn't have a problem with it, correct? From a setback and whatever the amount of space needed for that size business. But you're not saying we can't do it, or he can't do it.
Well, they put a ruling in place that said that there can only be 6 vehicles there.
Fair enough,
So,
on that property of
Have they
customer.
policed it? Have they gone out and inspected
The
that?
thing is, if you're gonna deny it, you have to have a reason without being biased.
Mm.
And that's the
Right.
problem. We have to be able to say that this is not possible, the way he's currently set it up, separate to the other agreement with the landowner. They're two separate issues.
There.
So let
You
me
got
ask you another
treatments that wanna
question.
make
And
sure
so
we
it's a
can
great
understand
point you
that.
bring up, and just for clarity for me. So let's pretend for a second it's not this particular issue. Is there a situation where someone wants zoning in an industrial area that we would have objections to because it's next to something or some other place, maybe zoned differently, maybe residential, and we just don't think it's the right thing for the town? Whether it's how we're looking at positioning the town, we've got people coming in, it's the Main Street, that's what I look at. I look at,
Yes, but-
we're trying to make this the downtown of the town.
Yes, but by that same token, commercial industrial means you're saying that no more new businesses can go into Main Street.
Well, I'm just, it
Because
does,
that's the argument in of itself, that Main Street is residential in general,
no, but I'm not saying it can't be, it's just that.
but that's the zoning for those commercial enterprises. It's the same zoning for both. That's the problem, right?
Mhm.
You're basically saying you can't have new commercial enterprises in the downtown.
No, but I think you can look
Or
at
maybe-
which kind of commercial
And
enterprises
that's
that
a
you want
possibility
downtown.
too.
Beautification.
Beautiful.
Right, I mean, exactly. I mean, you know, a junkyard is a commercial industrial,
Absolutely.
but are you gonna put it in your downtown area?
The question is, how much do we have authority to say that junkyard cannot happen in the downtown versus legitimate business that we're not happy with how they're doing it?
So it's an industrial, not a commercial per se.
Okay, well,
So commercial meaning grocery stores,
Okay,
like
yeah.
whatever.
So,
Industrial is
again,
Slightly different.
again, I just think that we're looking at, I'm just repeating myself, really, we're trying to set the Main Street in a certain
Yes.
particular way.
But how prescriptive can we be? I guess the
That,
question.
you're right, that's the question, and I don't know the answer to that.
I guess
Well,
the
like this is,
concerns are safety. Like, because when the bridge does open up, there's no room there.
Yeah, but
I mean,
that's-
we
but that-
evidently
but that
all see
argument
there's
can be
no
said
room
for
there.
the residential house being there to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
But-
we're on tear down.
But there's only, you've increased traffic by having a business
I'm
there.
not disputing that.
So I guess,
Blind
it's-
Hills exist all over the entire
I
town.
guess, I know, but we have to have
Yeah,
common
but that,
sense,
that
right?
argument, if there's enough existing land, you could still have a commercial or entity there that could have equal or more.
Absolutely.
But this isn't a request for commercial, it's a request for industrial.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but I'm just indicating that area could still.
Yeah.
be-
Because we have other garages operating in downtown that are not zoned industrial.
So I have
Yeah.
a question and a thought. The question is, if we vote no on this, does it shut him down right away?
For 1 year,
Um,
or can't reapply for 1 year. The shutting down, no, because he's operating under a conditional use until September-ish. Yeah, the fall, I think it's September. So that will continue. And then when that expires, he cannot apply for another rezoning, the same rezoning from 1 year, from when
Yeah.
council determines. If that would be tonight, then a year from tonight.
so if we deferred and told him that we wanted to see it cleaned up and we wanted to see a plan to keep it from having refuse all over the place.
Unsightly,
Is that appropriate?
unsightly is the word.
Right.
But is that fair? Because it doesn't have anything to do with the business. He's saying it's his personal stuff.
You
So
still have
can he just
unsightly,
come back? But
it's still unsightly premises.
It's
Does that
all
not
on
apply?
that piece
Then
that's
I'd
being
argue you'd go
rezoned.
to the landowner who is putting the stuff on and say, you have an unsightly premise.
are we allowed to do that?
I don't even mean just what's on the neighboring property. I mean,
I mean, all of it.
on the piece that
Yeah.
we're rezoning.
I would say based on, we have 6 months from time of public notice being posted. For rezoning. So we have since learned with another rezoning. And so it would apply for this one too. So the first public notice was posted on this one. I looked it up in case this question was asked, in October on the 29th. And that was for the amendment for the municipal plan. So that would bring us to April 29th. And then 6 months from the public notice for the rezoning would bring us to May 13th because it was posted on November 13th. So in that, a decision has to be made by council in that timeframe. Hypothetically, if council were to defer and not make a decision this evening, I would say that staff could work with Plan 360 to inform the applicant that a decision has not been made because operations can continue under the conditional use. And while staff can't enforce the zoning bylaw because they're zoning bylaws under the Community Planning Act, the planners have to do that. We can work with Plan 360 to do regular, I would say, inspections potentially from our own resources, although they can't necessarily be enforced. That would be more so to inform council of if there is progress on meeting.
It's not a matter of
council.
enforcement. It's a matter of if they're willing to adhere to what the guidelines are that we expect.
Right, and we
If
can
you want to
monitor
show-
if that is met. is what I'm
Show
saying.
some good faith that you're going to try to accomplish things required, then perhaps we will vote in favor. And if you cannot conform to the necessary requirements, that's fine. You don't have to. We also got to pass. We can vote against it. And that can easily be,
I'd like to see him come up with a plan to keep it orderly.
In conformity to the site plan that's proposed.
right now, April 29th. If that cannot be done, okay, fine. We will change our tune.
The other question I have is, and maybe I should know this, and I apologize for not. Who approved the temporary?
The PRAF, the planning review and adjustment.
So it never came here?
No.
So is that something that maybe we need to go back to, is that, like, this has put us in a position that was, Jason, a real bad spot. We're, that we shouldn't be put into. I just don't think we should. I mean, we have to make tough decisions at times, and we have. But I mean, how do we mitigate us getting into this situation in the first place?
I'd argue it's kind of nice. Because, quite frankly, you could even say, you can see what's being done and then vote against it because of what's being done.
Yeah, but then you're shutting down a business.
It's too bad. If you don't want to conform to what you've agreed to with
Yeah.
the site plan, it's easy for us to say no. You didn't conform.
The PRAC, so council sets the zoning bylaws, the municipal plan as the guidelines. The PRAC is the body that has the authority for variances, to vary from that for things like conditional uses, temporary uses. So that's within their purview to do that. But that's why there's things like the 1 year conditional use basically is it allows conditionally certain things to happen. But the formal rezoning from a permanent perspective has to be done with council's approval. So it's totally within their purview to do it. Yeah.
I'm certainly in favor of deferring and having discussions with the gentleman that's running the business and seeing if he can do what he can to help us change our mind to the come April.
And does council want us to work with Plan 360 to be able to do more of that proactive assurances to make sure that there's conformity to the site plan and document that? Or do we want to?
I would just explain to him what we want. And then it's up to him.
What's your opinion?
Follow the site plan.
I think we need to ensure that, I think, basically, I do not want to allocate municipal resources, but we can if that's what council wants to do, and we will on a regular basis. I'm not gonna say every 2 minutes. It's gonna be a ad hoc basis.
It's a spot check.
Well, exactly, yeah, and we will document them, and then council will
We also
make a
all drive
decision.
by
to see
there every day.
improvements.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Most of us drive by.
Just stop and take a picture.
yeah, we
It's
would
like,
document.
these are all
them.
the reasons why
You just stop there anyway.
that we're not going to.
Yeah, that's true, you do have to stop there anyways, that's true.
These is why we're gonna vote against me.
So that's,
The light was there for a reason.
we would keep Plan 360 in the loop on that, and it wouldn't be, to your point, it wouldn't be an enforcement perspective, it would be a documentation that there's compliance with the site plan based on the concerns.
If you don't want to
that were raised by
conform,
council.
that's fine. You don't have to. Your business will not survive in that location.
Can I ask a process question? Because I don't know the answer. So we can defer, or is it better to do first and second reading and then ask for him to conform and we don't go ahead with third reading? You know what I mean? Like, is there a better way to do it, or is it just,
Asked the same question at the last one.
yeah, I don't remember the answer.
Yeah, and last time there was no consensus on
No.
wanting to do first and second reading, but
Right.
changes can be made at any point for
For
third
third.
reading.
So is it easier for you guys to do
The-
first and second, or does it not matter?
By,
later would just speed the process.
by that 6 month mark, it has to be third reading and
Right.
enactment. So,
Right.
there's situations where you
Regardless
can
of if
do.
we're uncomfortable, we're not gonna move forward with third reading.
Right, exactly.
Right.
All it would do is technically move things a lot faster along the line.
Right, because if we defer, we still have to have 2 meetings about it. If we do first and second tonight, we only have to have the third later.
But I also think-
It would be awful bad if you get a different answer.
But I also
It's a
think it's,
different- but
It's-
a situation.
In that case, because it's the same thing then, and what
Yeah.
we can do is there is no, I'll put it this way, there is no issue with having first, second, and third reading between now and May and now and April.
Yeah.
Because you can call special meetings, there's instances where you don't need that full timeline.
Yeah.
I think it's a
That
show
can
of
be
good
done.
faith that we're not against him per se.
Just wanna look at.
That's
Yes.
exactly, we want,
We want
him to
business-
succeed.
We want things to succeed.
we wanna work together.
Within the
collaboratively. I
rules
think
that they are set aside, like,
That's exactly it, Councillor.
Ooh, so what are you saying? You think we should do first and
Yes,
second
yeah.
tonight?
I'm looking at just to see procedurally if that does that matter?
I mean, no, it's
Council.
not, it hasn't been enacted until you do your
Third reading.
You can do first and second and still turn down for third. I've seen that happen before with rezonings.
Okay.
But
due to issues
again,
with what.
you also, from a time perspective too, it's not like you're down to a,
Why?
Right,
No,
Right?
exactly.
yeah.
so.
But I do agree with Councillor Dykstra. It does send the message that we are collaborative, want to work collaboratively with the business owner to come up with solutions, ensure that we're all comfortable.
So what are you saying is we would do first and second reading? Vote yes.
We still have to have,
We still have
we can't tell
third
council
regardless.
how to vote, but we still have to have third reading regardless.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying is if we're suggesting to do first and second reading today,
Mhm.
and we have all these concerns,
Mhm.
why would we say yes?
We're not saying, we're saying with the follow-up that we're gonna work with the business to come.
Council would be
Reform
saying
can
yes to
apply.
this proposed site plan. I think based on what we're hearing
Yes.
is that council has concerns the site plan is not necessarily being followed.
Right.
So that first and second reading, I think based on the mention of good faith would be that yes to the site plan. However, between first and second reading and third
We
reading,
need assurances.
right.
Oh, it's carrot and stick.
Okay, I get it.
Does it
So-
send a mixed message to him if we move it along and then
Yeah,
We would pass along to the planner some of these concerns and would take the direction that that we will monitor it and document it and would tell the planners to pass that along as well.
But that we're willing to approve it. We're willing to finalize it with third reading if you conform. If you do not, we will not.
Do we have to list what we're asking him to conform to? Because we're talking about some other things outside of just having 6 vehicles parked there. We're talking about unsightly things. We're talking about the, you know, the buildup of tires that's coming along the edge of the edge of the property and some different things. So do we have to itemize these things, or are we just generically saying?
At what point do they become conditions on the rezoning is my question.
Well, the difference is you have a bylaw before you with conditions already. If
Alongside the
you
premises.
modify that bylaw that's there, then you have to go back through the process again. Because you changed the bylaw. Once you significantly modify a bylaw, you have to repeat the process. So
adding those conditions would significantly change enough that we'd have to start over,
I would have.
possibly.
Potentially.
Potentially.
I feel like that potentialness. That's a
Yes.
new word, is enough for me to say, let's defer.
And if they
Because
defer,
there
it's not
might
gonna-
be more conditions.
Yeah.
But we can itemize them this evening verbally and not put them in the bylaw to have that conversation with the landowner, but not modify the bylaw. That would be easier than.
But it's
having
also a
first
way
and
to
second
drag
reading
it
every
out too.
Saturday.
And do we have a bylaw that specifically is for industrial versus?
There's provisions in the
Residential?
zoning bylaw.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of that same zoning bylaw. It just has different zone provisions, I guess. Yeah.
So we don't have a bylaw. So just correct me if I'm wrong. The neighbor's residential, right?
No.
No,
One is industrial.
It's industrial.
the neighbor's industrial as well.
Yeah.
So both
That's
of them are
what we're
industrial.
getting at. is
Well,
where
this
the
one-
one's
are-
not
yeah, this one's not
That's
industrial
what-
right now.
That's what
Right.
they're applying
Right.
for.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. So
But there's not, the unsightly bylaws have some say in all this too?
there has to be certain triggers there, and I can't speak to specific, but their vehicles parked would not meet
I
that.
don't know, but the tire,
Accumulation of waste may at a certain
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
Yeah, at a certain point.
and to me, that should also be relayed at some point if that
So
does become.
do we want to
again.
defer completely or what's the?
So I think to
I don't have a
summarize,
dog in this
council
fight,
can
so.
consider first and second reading as we are right now. But if there are a list of formal conditions, then I think our recommendation procedurally would be to give us direction on those, but not consider first and second readings, so that we can relay those and also ensure that if the bylaw has to be amended, if it kind of meets that threshold of fundamental changes, that we can do that. If council wants to consider first and second reading, based on just providing that signal that yes, but in conformity to the site plan, and then in the meantime, ensure that the site plan is being followed, then council can consider first and second reading and not do third reading until late April, basically. And in the meantime, we can still have those conversations. It just won't have that formal list of hypothetical quote unquote conditions, basically. So those are basically the two, or council can say no, but then that triggers the 1 year not able to.
I think we have to provide you a list because we're gonna work in collaboration and partnership with this business owner. We in good faith should be telling him precisely what the expectation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So then it would be, no, we would not have first and second reading this evening.
Sounds good. So
So what is said?
But I think we need to go through that right now.
Yeah.
Let's go through it. Let's be very clear and concise and because again,
Yes, no.
vehicles parked on a neighboring lot is very hard to talk about.
Yeah, we can't,
We can't
Yeah, but
talk about,
that's-
I just want to be clear for this council. That
It's a separate
agreement with whatever neighbor, whatever amount of vehicles can be parked on that lane, we cannot lease that.
We cannot, but we have to have a provision there that respects the beautification of this
But
industrial
what I'm
setup.
getting at that industrial setup today, cars parked on that lot are allowable. So we can't stop that
But
regardless.
do we
Right, so-
not have an obligation to, like, that, there's no formal agreement in place that we have seen for that, right?
Correct.
So that could be shut down anytime, and we have to know that those vehicles then have to go on his property, which we're saying it's now.
But we can put whatever the use of the property that we're rezoning, we can put whatever is required in that lot. And he would be breaking those rules if he was to move them over to the
Right.
for rezoning. So that's the thing. So he, whatever agreement he has with that, that is up to him to maintain and keep. If he
Right.
loses that, he would not be able to use his lot for those. And that's what we would have to be very clear to him on is, and he seemed to when he was here know that. But we'd have to just be very clear, whatever the amount of vehicles he's allowed on the existing lot, great. Whatever's next door, if he can't maintain that relationship or that agreement, then he wouldn't be able, obviously, to be able to use it.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate here because we all know that that line is very tight and that garage is right on the line.
Mm.
So what about as garbage builds up? I guess this is the thing, you're saying,
Let's talk about garbage.
Who are we
Let's go
talking
back
to?
list of it.
you know,
Which landowner?
but what you're saying is we can't be concerned about that, but we should be concerned about it because it is, right now, it looks like it's all one.
But they're two separate issues and they're
They're-
two separate
we can't-
properties.
Well, they're
can't-
two
It's
separate
not two
properties,
separate
yes.
issues
but
because
the-
it's the business is spilling over on.
Exactly, it's spilling over on the adjacent property, so
But you
He
gotta
has
prove-
to prove that it's not,
No, you
No,
don't.
doesn't he?
No,
no.
that's the problem. You have to be able to prove that the business is taking place outside of that property.
But how, so does he put a sign on every vehicle to say, this is personal, this is my business?
I
And
I
they're in
don't
the
have a good
parking.
answer to
Well,
that.
that's what I mean. Isn't that the onus on him to prove that it's not? Because right now it just looks like it's all one thing.
I agree, but the problem is the secondary landowner is the neighbor. That's the problem.
That's my problem. Yeah.
But the problem is there's no way to even deal with that problem.
Not in this, there isn't.
Exactly.
But
I
we
don't
we
like
can approach any
any of it.
landowner, can we not?
but I guess we
Yeah,
still have an obligation to,
Be
we all
one ar-
agree
the
that
one
there's
area.
there's an unsightly bylaw in our town.
Yes.
Okay, so that is for every piece of property that's out there.
But the rules are different for residential versus industrial.
So that
Not
was,
from an unsightly,
that's
perspective,
what
not from an
okay,
unsightly.
because that was a question that I had. So whatever is spilling over, because I look at it that it's kind of all one
Yeah.
mess.
But there's a line there. That's the problem.
There's an invisible line that I don't know where that is. I can see hypothetically that it should be here, but I
So-
still think that we do have to take into consideration that the buildup of stuff that's gathering along the side of the garage is definitely, according to what we're seeing on this plan, spilling over onto the other property.
You're
So-
talking tires. That's the list that we could put together, the list
Right.
of those things.
Exactly.
I think vehicles on another property or something that we're gonna have to do separate.
Our unsightly, doesn't it have a clause about derelict vehicles?
So unsightly is not a usable vehicle. So if you have an old antique car that sits on your lot that has a cover on it and it sits there for 5 years, it's fine as long as it's drivable and it can move
Needs to be
itself. and it can be,
Right.
it has, yeah.
No lawn ornaments.
So that's another, what your lawn ornament looks like and
Exactly.
mine is
This
totally
is
different. What
subjective.
I think is, yeah, exactly. So that's the
That's
problem
why
with
dangerous
unsightly.
and unsightly is hard to
Exactly.
implement, police,
And
whatever the
we've
word.
had this situation in other portions of the town that we've not been able to.
Right.
They're by law, okay,
Right.
even though we don't think they look okay.
That's what I'm getting at as far
Yeah.
as, like, they are separate.
Like, it's not that we don't want this man to
Mm-hmm.
be able to do his business. What we need is cooperation from, I believe, both him and the other landowner. So I don't know how we achieve this.
All right, so we are clear that we are postponing this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but I think we're going through the
We
list.
still need a
So the
list
list, are we doing that in this meeting or are we doing that outside of this meeting?
I would do it now because we're running out of time.
We should do it
Yeah.
now.
You're giving us like as a verbal direction of the list that we'll give to the planners because we're not considering it.
As part of
And
the
we have
motion
to-
or do we just need to close
No.
this motion?
We don't need, we usually won't vote on the motion.
You have to,
We have to
Defer it.
Yeah, so we need to
Give it- oh,
make
yeah,
a
we have to
motion, we need
move
to
to
move
defer
to
it.
defer.
and
Yes,
then
this
you
is
can
true.
discuss all you want, but
Yes.
defer it and it's done. But when the bylaw is done and you put your list of requirements, you could say, I want a hanging basket on every whatever. In your list, that's the bylaw that has to go. So it needs to be completely done the correct way.
Mhm.
That's whatever, before you actually.
But that's why I think we're gonna do the verbal list of conditions. 'Cause
Right.
There may need to be amendments to the bylaw.
Yes, it's
Like
really,
that's
so there
the-
may
yeah,
need to be.
Yes.
So
That's
the
for-
list is gonna replace not having to redo the bylaw right now. That's what I'm understanding.
It,
Potentially.
it
Potentially.
becomes
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
bylaw.
Not necessarily, because then we have to amend it.
Yes.
We have to amend the bylaw, which we,
Done it.
right, but we may have to restart. They
Right.
have to determine,
Run away,
Plan 360 has to restart, to
Because there's
determine if
such
we
limited
restart.
space between the building and the property line, can there be any clause stating that no waste can be left, like no garbage, no dumpster
Zone.
could be put there? Not, like nothing, because there's such limited space that nothing could be used, or could be left there from a refuse perspective. Like, is there anything such as that type of? Because it's just how close it is to another property.
Like, are you saying if he wanted to put a garbage receptacle?
It's like a dumpster there, like just, there's not enough space between the side of his building and the property line. Or is there really no?
That's not a structure, so we wouldn't be enforcing it under a zoning bylaw. Because it's movable, right? It's not something that would require a permit essentially to do that. But it does speak to if he doesn't have enough space to fit it there, whether he can contain
Exactly.
on his own site.
Exactly. But is there
He has
any way
he has something in front
Yeah.
of his house there.
just to make it so that it has to be contained within the property? I don't know how to verbalize or.
I see what
articulate that.
you're saying, whatever, yeah, whatever he's doing within that business
Has to be contained.
has to be
within-
contained
within the
on the
business.
property,
Exactly,
on his own property, on the
on the business.
business property.
Exactly.
I understand what you're saying.
Just so any refuse is behind the building, so you can't see it from the road.
Are there not setback requirements to be a certain distance from your property line?
For certain things, like structures, right?
How did we get so close to this property line?
Well,
That's a whole different.
it's an established, it's an old building, it's an old house, right?
Hasn't been there that long.
The garage itself, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can build a garage on a
There
property
was,
beside a
I
property.
believe, a
That's not an
variance,
issue.
for that garage to be built. so
And
that it
clearly the
fit.
neighbor was okay with it.
Yeah,
That's how this happens. That's how this stuff happens.
and it may not be all that too close. It's like usually 1.2 on one side and 2 on, like, so I don't know how close it is. Yeah.
I just don't know about the regulations for commercial enterprises in terms of waste removal, in terms of hazardous, like environmental spill from some of these derelict vehicles or potentially derelict vehicles or oil spills with setbacks, especially near water courses. I don't have enough information to know. But then again, you go to River Glade and there's a dang junk area on the river, so I don't understand how that works, to be perfectly honest, so.
You and me both, buddy. You and me both.
it's not-
So I think, are we still getting the list or what are we
So,
doing?
yeah, let's, what else do you guys want on the list?
Do we have anything on the list?
Do
I
we,
don't know if
do we
have
need to
anything.
defer the motion before we get the list, or?
Yeah, we probably
Yeah.
should, yeah. So we need someone to move to postpone to a future meeting and it requires a seconder and a majority vote.
Yes.
So move to postpone to a future meeting, moved by Councilor Molina, seconded by Mr. Extra. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Reminded, motion carried. Okay, let's go back to the list.
I don't know that I have anything for the list, because I think my issues are with what's happening on the adjacent, on the property next door. So I'm not sure what to put on the list.
Well, and I mean, clearly we don't want him.
Okay, let's talk about the property next door, Stephen, and so what is your issue, the vehicles?
Yeah.
Okay, but those are, okay, but are they unsightly or
They're,
getting back to the definition of what Diane has indicated?
I don't think they're derelict.
No, but I'm saying.
Is that
if
the
any other
word you
garage
need?
was operating, they would be able to have
If
vehicles.
it's
parked.
They would need
No
a
tire- no
parking
tires,
lot
no
or
Parking
something.
lot or something. So if this landowner that was there,
Mhm.
they could park those cars there today.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate.
Mhm.
They could park those cars there today, separate from him,
Mhm.
completely separate if they so chose,
Mhm.
similar to what John's talking about in Riverglade.
Mhm.
That could occur and we would not.
It's not unsightly.
We would even, there'd be nothing we could say about it, do about it,
Exactly,
because on that land, it's allowed.
right.
For this individual, if it was, he could turn around and buy that land and do that, or he could turn around and lease that land and do that, and we would have nothing we could say about it. I'm indicating, that's my opinion, it is a separate issue only because it's allowable on that land.
When does an amount of vehicles become a parking lot, and when do you need to actually have a permit for a parking lot? Lori, when do you have a parking lot? How many vehicles? Two?
Looking looking at some of those now. I think all of those, like, we have to look at all that stuff. We can't give it to you in the off, so we don't give you the wrong information.
4, 6, 8, like at what point do you
I have
have
no
to
idea.
have?
Good question.
Actual
Industrial
zoning.
zone. Yeah, we will have to find out.
So what I
Yeah.
wanna see is no visible debris from Main Street. And I wanna see an organized parking area for the business, not cars in there haphazardly at different angles all over the place.
Painted lines,
Exactly.
I wanna see a parking lot.
painted lines.
And I want to add to that because I feel that his business should be able to operate within his own land. That restricts him to say, we.
But he's-
Yeah,
temporary
he could say all that
business
stuff is
is-
his own personal
Exactly.
stuff.
But
It's
that's-
not
but
anything
you
to do
know
with
what?
business.
I guess this is the thing. You can't have people just automatically or going out and asking neighbors to
Hmm.
facilitate their needs. That's not.
He could acquire
Because
land,
he
he put a
could-
parking
But,
lot.
But again-
but listen, this is what I'm saying. Why doesn't he? Why doesn't he go to his friend who's the neighbor and say, I want to lease this property, do a proper parking lot? We're not asking for, all we want is we want it to look proper. We don't want it to look like a mismatch of just helter skelter.
I think
Because that's what it
I
looks
think
like.
we all agree on that. But I do think we're gonna have to check in, even from a legality perspective on, we cannot say what happens on that land.
Yeah,
next to-
we're not
regard-
saying what happens on that land. What we're saying is,
On
can
the
we make a
land-
ruling that says, we want you to have your business, but your business has to be contained within its own property. And if he can't do that, then can he lease
But you
from
can't,
the
prove- but
neighbor?
you can't prove it's not. That's the problem.
You can't, like, private parking places are not business. But we gotta be very careful on, like, overstepping our,
Authority.
like,
I just hate the whole thing. I don't want to do it.
Again, to me, it all comes back to the site plan. If he's not gonna follow it, we're not gonna approve it.
Right.
If it's not,
And that's
But
easy to
that's the
say.
issue.
This
if
is
he
our
can-
problem right now.
yes.
We're trying to help him. And we're trying, everything that we're talking about, we can't do. So we want him to succeed, but it just basically comes back to, he's gotta follow the site plan.
Yeah.
He's gotta conform to what it
let's
originally
go
is.
And that's why there's a site plan and why the bylaw requires general conformity to the site plan, right? That's why.
let's go through today what he's not following on the site plan. So let's list out what he's not following.
Can I,
Yeah.
yes, please.
Absolutely.
can we have a list of items that you can put on to require people?
Right.
For rezoning, like flower boxes, fencing, can we ask them to make a parking lot bigger? Can we ask them to, what can and can't we do?
Well, you would, in this particular case, what you do is you look at your zoning bylaw and what's permitted in that particular zone that he's trying to do.
Mhm.
And then you see if it can conform to the rules under the bylaw. In this particular case, you've attached a site plan, so that's specific to say you have to have at least this
Mhm.
there on that site.
Just out of curiosity, is a industrial, commercial industrial zoning that close to a residential house allowed? Even though it's a zone house.
There's no setback for how close you can be. But there's only a portion of that property that's being zoned industrial, not commercial, industrial.
Fair enough, but
So
so industrial lot and that are, you can go to a residential area and change the zoning to industrial wherever you feel like it,
if council
approves it,
agrees
yes.
to potentially, but I mean, there's policies and regulations to help guide you make that decision as to whether that's a.
And blow back
Really?
from the public. Exactly, just because in this case, there's only one neighbor who happens to be the owner who doesn't have a problem with it. That doesn't mean other residential people in the neighborhood do not necessarily say they would like industrial use cases next door to such close to a residential property.
And some need, like, when there's neighboring industrial residential properties, there's buffers and things, but that's if it doesn't already exist. So like this already exists.
Not as industrial, it doesn't.
No, but the residential already exists. Like it's
Yes.
rezoning a parcel of a
Exactly.
piece of the PID.
I understand that, but this is that close to residential. And that's where I question its validity. Now, they could say that they're waiving their rights to fair enough, but do we not have a leg to stand on in terms of how close it is to a residential house? In terms of our communication to
Well,
the public.
we're also not even rezoning the entire pit.
I'm not
Just a portion
disputing,
of it.
I'm not disputing that, but it's still how close that pit is to a resident. It's what? 5 meters?
Section 3.23B 5 lists the buffer. So it just says where a lot in a commercial or industrial zone abuts a residential use, such a lot shall not be developed for commercial or industrial use unless a buffer such as an earth berm, hedge, or fence, or a combination thereof is provided and maintained along the common property lines.
Therefore, they have to have a fence the whole way around the place. They can't put cars on the other side.
The other side's industrial.
Doesn't matter, it's still the property line.
Yeah, but it's not, it does matter because if it abuts a residential use, that abuts.
Only,
an
the fence
industrial
only
use.
applies to the residential
It's-
side,
It only applies when it abuts a residential use.
so they have to put a fence between their house and their business.
So if he was, so if he was putting this in the property next to it was a residential house, he
You
would
would need a buffer.
need to put a buffer,
But it's not.
but it's not.
And so here we are.
Because it's
So
along
he doesn't wanna put
the
it
common
Between
property
his
lines.
property and his house.
It's one piece of property.
That
Still
is not
wouldn't
the
probably
issue.
change anything. would it?
He's gotta walk around the fence to get.
I think the existing property, that's the type of thing that he's not following, that we need to talk to him about.
I don't know.
I don't know if he followed the site plan and
So
kept
that
his
what on the
property
site plan here?
tight.
But on the
Really?
site plan today, what is he not following?
Well, there's been complaints already, right? Do we have visibility into what those complaints are?
Yes.
Are we
So
sure they're
that's the
about
list
this
then.
property or are they about the abutting property?
It's about this site plan and it's through this rezoning process that it's been raised to us to ask about
So whatever's on that list of the complaints is what he's not following. Those are the things we need to talk to him about.
parking, which we have talked about. So it would be, it's parking.
I think everybody is up in arms about that. I mean, how do we fix that? I don't know, because you keep saying that it doesn't matter,
Exactly.
that
So
he can do whatever he wants on the neighboring, but I don't see that.
No.
I don't understand how,
He can't do whatever he wants, but it's the other property owner's issue. The unsightliness is the other property owner, and that's who you have to talk to.
so
about the
could we go
unsightly
after
property.
the other property owner with an
Yes.
unsightly thing?
If
The
they
question
be
is, what
unsightly.
is the
Right, but it might not
definition?
be unsightly.
What's the definition of unsightly? And can we change the
Can we,
definition of
can we
unsightly?
ask,
No.
can we ask any property owner to clean?
So so further to the point about unsightly. Do we know for a fact that the other property owner land isn't unsightly?
I wouldn't be able to say that in a meeting, but what I can say is that we don't have an unsightly file or complaint
For that
open for
property.
So if someone,
any of the properties.
so if someone lodged a complaint,
Mhm.
then we'd have to look to see whether it's unsightly.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
But what is the definition of unsightly in this, in this?
It's what's in
I
our
don't-
bylaw and what's in the local governance act.
Yeah.
Can't change it
And why can't we change it
because it's the local governance
as a
act.
bylaw?
Well, we could change our bylaw, but.
Exactly. I
The
thought we
bylaw,
could do
no, you
bylaws
can't.
here. That was the
No,
whole.
The
Can't change
bylaw, the local governance
You can
act
add one.
stipulates the dangerous and unsightly premises needs to match.
Follow the
Yeah.
other one.
And when we brought another request out for residential occupancy standards, council did not want to do that anymore, so.
I still want to.
I'm gonna press my button. Pressing my button. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Um, I want to bring us back to planning the future of the town of Salisbury. And talking about when the bridge goes in and we want to do curb and sidewalk there. How does that affect this property with what's already going on there?
We haven't indicated we're doing curb and sidewalk there.
We haven't, however, we've got a strategic plan in place that we're working towards beautification and, making sure that that downtown is beautified and
What kind of setback would be
growing in the
required
future.
for
I'm
future
asking, yeah,
sidewalks?
exactly. I do not want to limit us, and we're also looking at, where our trails are going and how we connect to that. We've got the Centennial Trail that's right there, like, I believe that we need to consider that for future.
Well, even without sidewalks, people walking from the trail
Correct,
down Main Street, are they gonna have to walk out into traffic?
correct,
To get around
correct.
cars?
So I think there's a lot more to this than I, right now, do not feel, Mr. CAO, that we can even come up with a list to be, I feel that there's so much more that we really need to be talking about here and putting our heads together, to come up with.
Wouldn't it be a valid reason just to say that we have concerns about approving this based on strategic plans that we have for the downtown area?
Yeah.
And that,
Absolutely.
you know, that in of
Absolutely.
itself.
My only concern with that is that we don't have any in our capital plan, to the mayor's point, we have no specifics that say we want sidewalk there. It's not part of the trail master plan at this point, not to say
Yeah.
it won't be, right?
And I'm
But
saying sidewalk, but I'm just talking about future.
connectivity of some sort, yeah.
Connectivity of some
Yeah,
sort.
and generally that would go in that utility easement. I don't know without looking at it if that's permitted. What is there? Is there, I don't know. to be
So do we
totally
all agree
honest.
that we really need to, I think, have a planning session like, about
We-
this and,
We can't really. I think what I would recommend at this point is that we have a conversation. It's been deferred, so we have a conversation with Plan 360 on all of these things. Ultimately, come back to the site plan. Like, so we do not need a list because the site plan exists, and there are concerns on general conformity to the site plan. We can communicate that to Plan 360, the planner that's working on this file. We can communicate it to the applicant, and the town can monitor and document between now and future meetings. And we will talk with the planner and the applicant and work backwards from that 6-month mark and bring it back forward to council, because we can't, we have to make a decision at some point because we have to process the rezoning applications that we get.
can we also add to that, Austin, that we do have a concern, because I do have a concern about planning for the future and the development with the bridge going in and access to,
My biggest concern there would be safety, somebody backing
Yeah.
up on Main Street.
Yeah. I feel that we have to put that in there because it's a definitely a legitimate concern.
Planning and safety.
Absolutely.
So that would be my recommendation at this point, and it makes it easier because then
Perfect.
there's no list.
Yep.
We can
Perfect.
Just
go from there.
to, I don't think the site plan says anything about the parking has to be orderly. It can't be just a scattered bunch of cars.
Exactly. Well, again, that comes back to,
The issue is
Unsightly.
that we're not happy with the way this looks.
no.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And how hard is it? I don't want to be difficult here, but if there's only this many cars there, how hard is it to park those cars so it doesn't look like that?
Cause there's not only that many cars there, and that's the problem.
No, but
You can't, he doesn't have enough space for his personal life and his business life
No.
and his other
It's
business
one or
life.
the other.
That's now bleeding on the
Yeah.
other
I don't think it matters if it's personal or business that's parked in that lot for the business. There can only be 6 cars in that lot,
Yeah.
whether it's personal or business.
right.
Okay.
I don't,
Do we
I don't
have
know.
to do anything else here, Austin?
No, we will talk to the planners to ensure general conformity to the site plan. And that's,
And
we'll bring
monitor.
that back.
So
Yeah, and monitor.
if we vote against this just because we don't like it,
You already deferred it.
I understand, but in the future, if we vote against it because we don't like it, versus without having a good reason to not vote for it, is there really any recourse he has other than have to wait a year?
Council has the jurisdiction to make land use,
Yes.
and you're elected to make those decisions. So you have to take the information that's provided to you to make those decisions. Someone can appeal to the planning appeal board or whatever their formal name is, but that process looks at the process that's followed. Ultimately, council has the authority and the purview to determine if it is permitted or not.
So therefore, the question then becomes, if we decide to vote against it without enough proper objection. That's what the right word.
Well, we just spent an hour talking about objections, I
I
think. so
understand, yes.
There's objections.
The proper documentation of nonconformity. If we don't have enough evidence to support our position, can they still go around us in the future? Through whatever appeal process?
Did I just make, and then I'm not supposed to interject?
How about
But
it?
there is no appeal process for a rezone.
So we're the last,
You guys are the decision makers. The only recourse is
Public.
court system of you failed to did something incorrectly
With the process,
with the process.
Yeah. the process,
But you can't go to the appeals board for rezoning.
because you don't like a decision of council. It's the
Council
process.
Right, I mean, and even we just talked about planning and safety. We have a responsibility for that. You know, and in terms of,
Yes.
and people can argue one way or another whether they believe that the level of degree of that may or may not be the case, but it's still a valid topic for us as a council to be mindful of.
And planning, I agree with. Safety is, I don't know if that we are qualified enough to speak to the safety in of itself. I don't want to stick my neck out too far for that. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so what's next?
Okay, so you
That's it.
you
It's
have
been
you
deferred.
have your direction, so
Okay.
you don't need to vote on that.
No, we already
Motion
did.
to adjourn?
We already did, yeah.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor
Seconded.
Thorne, seconded by Councillor Bannister. Questions of the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
We are now adjourned.